The basic issue behind subsidy retention arises out of the simple observation that over time people's incomes tend to go up, but in many communities the cost of housing tends to go up even faster. This creates a growing affordability gap between what people earn and what they pay for housing. Let's take an example. Imagine a family of four several years ago where both parents were teachers, and let's say that they had a combined annual income of $57,000. That's $4,750 a month. If they spent a third of their income on housing, that'd be $1,500 a month for housing. Now, let's say that they wanted to buy a house and pay $1,500 a month as their mortgage payment. Well, they could afford a house that costs something like $200,000, depending on interest rates and everything else. Now, imagine it's 5 years later and another family with two teachers wants to buy the same house. Well, teacher salaries have gone up, so this new family can pay a higher mortgage payment every month. But housing costs have gone up even faster, and now the same house costs more like $300,000 instead of $200,000. The new family is going to have to pay a higher percentage of their monthly income in order to buy the house. That is, if they can qualify for a mortgage at that higher percentage. Now, imagine that the city wants to help the family. This family could qualify for a $225,000 house, but there are no $225,000 houses available. But if the city gave them $75,000, then they could afford to buy a $300,000 starter home. But here comes the problem. To help the next family, it's going to cost the city more, and the time after that, it's going to cost even more. As long as housing prices are rising faster than incomes, it's going to cost more and more money to help the same kind of family buy the same kind of house. Cities recognize that they'll need more money in the future to help other families, so they will often try to get some of the money back when a family sells a house that they helped to subsidize. This is called subsidy recapture. Here's how it works. Let's say that when they bought the house, a family qualified for a $215,000 loan from a private lender. They made a $10,000 down payment, and the city loaned them $75,000 so they could buy a $300,000 home. And let's say 5 years later they sell the house for $400,000. Here's what happens. They repay the remaining balance on their mortgage, about $200,000, and then they repay the city $75,000. That leaves the family with $125,000 in equity. Now the city has $75,000 that they can reinvest in another family. Unfortunately, housing prices have risen and they need $125,000 to make that same house affordable to another family at the same income level. By recapturing the initial subsidy rather than giving it away, subsidy recapture helps communities serve more families with the same amount of public funds. But it doesn't solve the basic problem that larger and larger subsidies are required to keep housing affordable to the same kind of families. The only way to prevent a need for additional infusions of public subsidy in rapidly appreciating market is to focus on subsidy retention instead of subsidy recapture. In order to preserve the impact of limited public funds, it's becoming more and more common for public agencies to look beyond subsidy recapture to subsidy retention models like community land trusts, limited equity condominiums, limited equity cooperatives and mutual housing associations, and deed-restricted home ownership. There are several subsidy retention models, but they're all based on one simple idea. In exchange for public assistance in purchasing a house, the buyer agrees to limit the price at which he or she can sell that house later. Here's how it works. Remember our family buying a $300,000 house? They qualified for a $215,000 mortgage and made a $10,000 down payment, and they received $75,000 in homebuyer subsidy. 5 years later, they're ready to move. Now the market price of their house is $400,000. But 5 years later, a family at their income level can only afford to pay $275,000. Suppose the first family had agreed to limit their sale price to a level that was affordable to a family like theirs. Now, a similar family could buy it without any new subsidy. If the formula price is based on increases in income rather than the housing market, then the house can remain affordable to one low-income family after another forever, without any new subsidy. At the same time, each family can still earn substantial equity, just not as much as they would from an unrestricted house. If the first family put in $215,000 in their mortgage and a $10,000 down payment, and they sell for $275,000, then they've earned $50,000 in equity, plus about $15,000 of the mortgage that they've paid off. Of course, no one in America is eager to limit their ability to profit from selling their house. But families that could never buy a home without help are more willing to limit their equity in exchange for the benefits of home ownership, like having a decent place for their family to live, stability and security, the opportunity to build some equity, and the homeowner tax deduction. And for the community, there are also very significant benefits. Subsidy retention programs provide homes for low and moderate income households now and into the future. They provide a place for the local workforce to live, stability and diversity. Subsidy retention models are one of the few ways to improve an area without leading to displacement or gentrification, and they maximize the return on very limited public investment. And by focusing on retention instead of recapture, scarce public dollars can help more families. How many more? Let's do an exercise to think about it. Imagine a city invests a given amount of money to assist a certain number of families. After several years, they all move and either return their subsidy or sell at an affordable level. Enter the assumptions that seem reasonable to you and press Start to see how many families are assisted by each model. The model will continue to show the number of families helped and any necessary resubsidization until you press the arrow below to advance to the next slide.